How can publishers and platforms best work together? Here to discuss is Facebook's Global Head of News Partnerships, Campbell Brown, and Glamour Editor-in-Chief, Samantha Barry.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a very interesting 30-minute chat ahead with somebody that I think is probably one of the most open people at Facebook when you put them on a stage, which is a compliment.
Until it gets me fired.
Campbell Brown, you're the head of news partnerships at Facebook, leading a global team that's responsible for helping news organizations and journalists around the world work more closely and effectively with Facebook. You've been in that role for 2 years, and we're going to dig into what those 2 years have been like. Before joining Facebook, you were well known as an anchor and a correspondent at NBC and CNN. Previous to that, you started in local news, which is really kind of full circle because you're working a lot with local news providers at the moment. And for those of you who don't know, Campbell has been very vocal on her interest and efforts in education in America. So we've got 30 minutes.
Okay.
We want to get through a lot. I think, we want to talk about, really honestly, what is the relationship between publishers and platforms right now. I think one thing that I know that a lot of people in this room care about is the path to significant monetization for publishers on those brands, and then maybe some takeaways on who is winning and who is losing.
Okay, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
We'll get through it.
Facebook was 15 yesterday.
Yeah.
It has had different variations of relationships with publishers.
Yeah.
Some years and months have been really good. Some businesses built their whole media companies around the Facebook algorithm. Some have been less good, and we've kind of come off the back of what can only be described as probably 6 months to a year of mistrust and miscommunication. Where do you see the relationship right now between Facebook and those people that are making content?
I think it's different with different publishers. I mean, we are in a very challenging environment, period. I think all of us, given what we're trying to figure out. The media industry is going through this massive, massive transition. Most of my friends are reporters. It's all we talk about is trying to envision what the future looks like. And I don't think any of us have a clear picture of it yet. So we're at a point now where we're experimenting a lot with publishers. In some cases we're successful, in some cases we're not, and trying to move the ball forward in areas that are going to work and be not what you described as, which I think was a real problem, where a business is built entirely based on Facebook's algorithm. That is crazy. Because you will never get predictability that I think a business needs if that's your strategy. We've shifted the way we think about that and talk about that, and we are focused almost entirely. Well, my team also works on misinformation, so that's a big piece of it. But the partnership side is focused almost entirely on monetization. And it means different things for different people. We finally have a paywall that we're testing on Facebook to support subscriptions, which I think was a really important step. The test is in beta right now. I think it's going well. Tribune, our early results are good. Tribune had, for example, 3 of their publishers in the test. They've since added 4 more based on the results they were seeing. So
let's talk about that test for a second. So this is for the likes of the New Yorker or the New York Times. It is using Facebook in order to get subs directly to their brand. Yes.
So previously, there was no gated content on Facebook on instant articles. So this was, Mark had long had a philosophical view that he wanted information to be free, and that if you start, gating content on Facebook, then it becomes only available to people who can afford it. We spent a lot of time, this is in my first year at Facebook, just meeting directly with publishers and getting everybody to a point where it was clear if subscriptions are going to be the path forward for a lot of people, and it's pretty clear that is going to be the path forward for a lot of different publishers, that we needed to support that.
How do you pick who's in the test?
I wish there were some magazines in the test. The Economist is in the test, but not. I don't know that anybody in this room is participating. We would love to have you be part of the test, but you have to be part of Instant Articles. Instant Articles doesn't work for everybody, so that is probably going to be a reason for some publishers. But we're also testing other things, like a membership model, where you wouldn't necessarily put content behind a paywall, but you would have a member who would pay, let's say, a monthly fee, and then get access to exclusive content or live Q&As. We just started that test, but I think for this room, that could be really interesting.
So Facebook has been, up until recently, very much a business that has been built off people's data, right, and an advertising model. Are you more and more in with this subscription test, and I see Facebook Marketplace where people are selling stuff from their house, or boots that I don't want. Are you becoming more a platform where people exchange money? Is that kind of and money for services rather than data for services?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think advertising is still going to be part of the equation. And I just think getting it to a place where it works for publishers is going to take some effort, and we are not there yet. Just video monetization, I think, is a good example. We have real work to do on that front, I think, to make it work for a lot of publishers. Some are having success, but we are doing some things that I think will be significant. Introducing pre-roll, which was a big ask, I think, from a lot of people. Looking at direct sales, which I think is really important, would be important to publishers. We have to make sure it works first, but I would like to see that happen. And then, we ask people to make the shift to short videos, to 3-minute videos in order to monetize, and that was something that people are adjusting to and struggling with, in addition to other ranking changes that we've made. And I get that, but at the same time, we made that change for a reason, because we found that at 3 minutes, people will actually watch an ad break all the way through. And people have got to watch the ad in order to monetize.
How is mid-roll going for Facebook?
I think we're making progress, but look, I feel, having spent 20 years of my life plus as a journalist, a sense of urgency about everything we're doing. So in my mind, nothing's going fast enough.
So one of the big things that you've been behind in particular just this year is the announcement that Facebook was going to invest $300 million in local, over a 3-year commitment to news programs, partnerships, and content. I've got a couple of questions around that.
Yeah.
Who gets a slice of that pie, right? How do you,
Yeah.
because we have come off a lot of times where I want to hear also what the most common complaint from publishers are, but where publishers in general feel like they're giving a lot away without enough to back. So how is that $300 million being spent? Who gets a slice of the pie? And then what happens at the end of that 3 years?
Yeah, so how it's being spent. Number one, we have made some just direct investments in nonprofits that are doing really good work. Local news is a passion of mine. I came from local news. We are at Facebook very focused on communities, and local news is absolutely central, I believe, to holding communities together, to bringing people together. Local news is struggling, really struggling right now. So we've made some direct investments to nonprofits like Report for America that actually will put reporters in places that don't have anyone covering, anything in those towns. I mean, you can imagine a world where the local paper, there is no local news outlet, and the mayor basically can do whatever he wants. That's a scary thing, and that's kind of the direction I think we may be headed in some places. So I think there's just a lot of nonprofit work that we need to do to just get cash to certain places now. But last year, in my first year, we took the money in my budget and experimented with a lot of different programs to try to figure out what would work. Some of them did, some of them didn't. There was one thing, though, that really every publisher who participated came back and said, this was amazing, let's keep going, let's do it with other things, and that was this accelerator program we started, where we took a group of about 14 publishers to work on subscriptions. It was essentially like a very hands-on, they had to make a commitment to spend over 3 months in a very hands-on training that looked at how to market for subscriptions, both on and off Facebook. This was not about our products, but whatever it takes for a given publisher to be successful with building a subscription business and growing subscription acquisitions. At the end of this sort of boot camp, we gave them a grant and said, here's some money, let's experiment with the things we learned and figure out what works, and then share all our learnings because they're not in competition with each other. It was a home run. And we also did it with video in Argentina, where there's not a lot of expertise around how to make a social first video for mobile, and made enormous progress. And we have had the publishers coming. Look, I'm listening to publishers. They know best. Like, this is a good thing. Keep doing this. Don't do that. And so what we did was take a big chunk of this money, and we're going to expand the accelerator program globally. So we are now launching a membership accelerator. I mentioned the membership model. So we will have a group of publishers that we'll work with to experiment with the membership model, see what works, see what doesn't, with grants that we can test as we go through the program, and then share those learnings as widely as we can. So that, the money, we're also, last thing, we're hosting a conference with a lot of other funders in March to have a really open conversation about people who are passionate about local news in particular, to figure out how best we can direct some of these funds and what we can partner on. So that's coming, but I think in terms of what impacts this room, I would say the accelerator program, I hope, is going to be a huge success. And then we're still doing content licensing for News and Watch, which is a big chunk.
Let's dig into that, because I think there's some people in the room in particular, there's a lot of magazine publishers, big and small. As somebody that is now in publishing, but previously worked in broadcast and ran social media at CNN, sometimes with Facebook, it can feel a little whiplashy. Like, am I supposed to put my efforts into Facebook Live? Is it into 3-minute video? Am I supposed to put any and all of the social effort I have into subscriptions? What's the best piece of advice if people in this room have, they're small or big publishers, magazine, you're like, okay, to this year, 2019, I would focus your Facebook effort on what?
So there's not one size fits all. And I would say the whiplash was our fault in terms of, I think, how we communicated about a lot of the changes we were making, or a lack of communication. Live is a really good example of that. So what I have tried to do is change the way this team approaches their work with publishers, which, number one, means be really honest and really direct. Facebook cannot be the entire solution to your problems. It can be part of the solution, but if you are building a business based entirely on Facebook that has an algorithm that is constantly changing, then that is going to be a challenge. And I would not tell anyone to do that. Instead of, and I think this is what we were doing before, which was going to publishers and saying, hey, we have this new product our engineers built, why don't you try it? We have tried to stop doing this, and instead, when we launched the Facebook Journalism Project, we really just sat down with publishers and said, okay, you decide what we should be building, and then tell our engineers how it should work. And that's how we ended up with the paywall. So I think that has been really important. And then just being extremely direct about how we communicate the changes that are coming. And then going to a publisher, not saying, here, take this product, try it out, but saying, what do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish on Facebook? Do you want to grow your email list? Do you want to, grow your groups? And then let our teams help you strategically figure out how to achieve that goal instead of us pushing products on you.
It's interesting because there has been that switch, and from personal experience.
Is it going well? I don't know.
Well, I'm fascinated on that subscription. For these people in this room, that subscription model. I remember in the very early days of Facebook Live, CNN was the first organization to ever go on Facebook Live, and I think we ended up doing 100 every month. And it really was for us to take our broadcast skills and put them onto Facebook. But I think third week in, I turned around to the Facebook engineers and I said, I need a kill switch. And they didn't understand what I needed, but if you're in a control room and a producer is somewhere else and something is happening behind them, you need to be able to shut off the broadcast from back at base. And it was interesting because the Facebook engineers had never worked in a real media
In a
environment.
newsroom.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Yeah, so that is a different relationship. Do you find you're the one that's, you come from a media background, you're obviously very passionate about the local journalism, and $300 million is an amazing amount of money, but in a company that made 19.5 billion in the last quarter seems like a little drop of the ocean. Do you find that you're fighting a battle to make the rest of Facebook understand how important the relationship between the media and Facebook is?
No, I feel like, first of all, it shouldn't just be me, and our team is really growing and has globally, and we have hired, I think my team in particular, a lot of people with backgrounds in media for exactly that reason. Anne Kornblut, for example, who was a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter at the Washington Post, is now going to lead this local news effort. And I do think it's less, I think, how you characterized it, and more like we can now communicate to the engineers, you need a kill switch.
Right.
Like, stop, in a way that is really, really important. So I do think there is a commitment. What I don't want to do is just throw money at the problem, because that just makes you dependent on this company that is, by its very nature, constantly changing and is not dependable. So in my view, if I'm looking for a long-term solution for what the future of journalism is going to rely on financially, I want lasting business models that work, not a big tech company writing a check when it feels like it. I think that is a nerve-wracking place to be. So that's why the focus is on the business models and what products we can build to make them successful.
You're constantly in conversations with CEOs, editors-in-chiefs of media companies. What is the most common thing they ask you for or want to know?
It's exactly what you're asking me about now. Subscriptions, video monetization are the two big things. Why can't you move faster? Why can't you do what Google's doing? Which we're just very different platforms. We don't operate the same way. And so there are areas where we can't do things. One area in particular where I do want to see us make more progress is around data and analytics and just sharing more. Given the privacy issues that the company's been dealing with, this becomes more challenging. But I do think that we can build more tools for publishers to better understand what's happening with their subscribers than we currently have. Although I'm pretty psyched about what we currently have. We just launched Creator Studio that lets your social teams manage all their pages as like a one-stop shop. And CrowdTangle, which I don't know if this room knows about, but your social people certainly do, is a tool that lets you benchmark against your competition. And Facebook Analytics, we're trying to make it better and much more publisher-friendly. So that ask of like more information, help us understand who our readers are, who our viewers are, where they're coming from, what their interests are. And I think about who is successful at that. We're focusing a lot on groups as a company.
Who is successful? Who's doing a good job?
So on the groups piece in particular, because it's, we talk about a paywall, we talk about subscriptions, but we also have to focus on retention and loyalty. And I look at what Condé Nast Traveler is doing with their group, Women Who Travel. And it is like a group devoted to women sharing their experiences of traveling alone. They have 120,000 members, and they've started doing these in-person gatherings with the group. They are selling trips. They're like, that is a diehard cohort that they have developed. The New Yorker with their film group, where they have their film critics engaging with the people who are members of this group. Wired has a good one that's around parenting in the digital age.
Is there any non-Condé ones? Otherwise, they'll think
I'm
I
sorry.
bribed you.
Sorry, I shouldn't.
We did not plan this.
Well, like on video, I look at Hearst, and they're like amazing on video.
So video is an interesting one, in particular for people in this room, because a lot more people in the publishing industry are trying to explore what video looks like for them. It's got a higher CPM. It seems where a lot of people are going. And then on the flip side, we see some very video-centric companies fall apart, right? And not have the sustainability. What's your advice for the people here that want to explore in video? Is it very, very edited and heavy production stuff like Facebook Watch? Is it live? Is it quick and dirty, 2-minute explainers? What is it?
It's number one, know your audience before you decide what it is. So this is why I would say, you look at Cosmo or Good Housekeeping, who like they get their audience. Beauty videos, do-it-yourself videos. They understand where to put ad break and how it works, and they're very successful with that. I don't, but on the other hand, like News and Watch is not hyper-produced necessarily, or Watch more generally has very produced shows, but not all of them. Our most successful news show, and there's a piece in Variety about it today, is ABC's On Location, is what it's called. And it is just like the most, like it's everything shot on an iPhone going like this is what it feels like, but it gives it a sense of urgency, and it's great, and they're doing really well, and it's not hosted, it's not doing what I used to do, sit behind an anchor desk. I feel like we're dinosaurs, those of us who lived that life as journalists. It's about the correspondents in the field who are bringing you sort of the urgency of the moment. And that really seems to resonate.
You get a back end, you get an insight into what people are actually watching, how much time they're spending with content. I asked this question once to the co-founder of Netflix, what he was surprised about on his platform, what surprised him in terms of content area more than any other. And his answer was how much time people spent with Hallmark Christmas movies, which it turns out is a whole big thing. But what surprises you in terms of what people spend, hours on Facebook with in terms of video or just content in general?
Well, I probably wouldn't have the best answer on Watch overall. I mean, just in terms of the shows. So we launched a news tab within Watch in June. So we were later to the game for news than entertainment, but we launched a lot of shows. Business Insider, who was, great at really short, snappy videos, wanted to do a long-form show, and I was like, ugh, really? That's not what you guys do. It's been amazing and hugely successful. They've really found an audience, and I would have never predicted that. We have Anderson Cooper doing a show, and it's doing well, but I think the ABC News correspondence in the field is sort of at a different level, and it's just interesting. That's what these tests are about, and that's what we're doing right now is testing, because we don't know and we're learning. The one thing I think we do know with Facebook is what will make Watch unique from other, the kind of video that's going to succeed on other platforms is the social aspect of it, social first. So, how do you bring people together to engage around video? I mean, you look at Red Table Talk, which is probably the most successful thing on Watch. I mean, it is, in moments where you can have people sort of gather and be in those moments. I mean, just imagine with groups at a red carpet before a big, award show where you have your audience talking about the clothes. I mean, that is a place I would want to be before a big award show. So I think the social aspect of it is what makes Facebook different and unique, and that's where we're going to be most successful working together if we think about the social first piece.
There is this out in the zeitgeist, this idea that people are spending less time on Facebook, more time on Instagram, more time on WhatsApp. Are you seeing a difference in how much time people are spending on Facebook versus the other Facebook-owned platforms? I think it's who. I mean, Instagram, is the next generation, and you guys already know that. You're spending an enormous amount of time on Instagram. I want to solve this sort of news puzzle for Instagram because the younger people are getting their news from Instagram, and it's that audience is. Needs to be, they're going to be very different news consumers than we are. Mm-hmm. And so what storytelling is what kind of storytelling is going to resonate with them, especially around hard news. And that's, I don't think that's something we figured out yet. Your team not only deals with the relationship with journalists and media, but you also have kind of a big piece of the puzzle, which is you're very much the executive that's looking at the spread of misinformation on the site. We're now looking, there's a lot of commentary on what happened in 2016. 2020 has started in earnest. What are Facebook doing to shore up that the same things don't happen and the new problems that we haven't even predicted won't happen around the US election?
So I would say, for not just the US election, this is like a 24/7 challenge for us. The election in India is coming up. There are elections all over Central Europe right now. Our team, election integrity is, let me describe it this way, because I think this is probably the best characterization. You know what a company is serious about by where they spend their money. We are spending a lot of money. We've made that clear in every way in our earnings and in all our conversations on misinformation, safety on the platform, and integrity post-2016. This is a very different company today than it was 2 years ago. Massive investments, both in people, in terms of people, and financial investments have been made. And I think the evidence shows that we've made real progress. This is never going to be perfect when you look at misinformation on the platform. It's never going to go away entirely. The bad guys will keep getting more and more creative, and so will we. We are working very closely with third-party fact checkers globally, and that these are the smartest people, in some cases journalists or full-time fact checkers, who are helping train the artificial intelligence that's ultimately going to get us to the place I think we want to be. But this is a sort of lifelong problem that we'll be dealing with. But I would just say we have made dramatic progress, and I think there was no news around this last midterm election around Facebook, and that was a good thing. So with 2020, as you said, actually starting, I can't believe it, but like debates happening. I mean, it is what keeps everybody up at night.
I do want to throw out to the audience for at least one or two questions, but before I do, for this group of people, for them to take away this evening, how should they be working with and the relationship with Facebook? Like, what is the one thing you want them to take away from this room?
So it is that you as a publisher have to figure out what your strategy is, and then in your relationship with Facebook, let us help you get there. For some, that's going to be subscriptions. For some, it's going to be video. For some, they want to try a membership model. For some, it's developing groups. And pick your path, and I think we can really help people get there. But the old, I can't say it enough, the old model, which was create little short videos that are going to go viral, is not going to work anymore. We have cracked down on clickbait. We have cracked down on sensationalism. They are not getting the same kind of traffic they were. And there were a lot of publishers who, as you pointed out, built a business entirely on Facebook and viral videos. And those businesses are done. They have to come up with something entirely different. It's, predicting the algorithm is not something that I could do or anybody else. It's based on what people want to see. And so if we are constantly having a conversation about my traffic's up, my traffic's down, we're not going to ever really get anywhere. And there's always going to be that tension because tech companies are, by their DNA, about change and innovation. And, if you're trying to run a business, you want to know what's coming and some predictability. And so there's an inherent tension that I think is always going to be there. But I really hope that my team can help bridge the gap.
So come to Facebook with your strategy, and you'll sit in a room and help them figure out.
Or we can help you figure out your strategy based on our learnings. But trying every different product that I think we have is, or doing things the way we used to. We just don't. The incentives have changed. We don't reward those things anymore. And we create, and I take full responsibility. We created the incentives that led to clickbait, but we had to make that change. You know, we are cleaning up this platform, and we're not going back to clickbait and sensationalism. So with that in mind, we have to find a new path forward.
That's great. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I don't know if there's a microphone, just one down the front.
Hi, thank you. Campbell, you know better than anybody, you know, in the old days, journalists graduated school and then they went out as stringers, right? And into the market, and you went to Pittsburgh or you went to St. Louis and were immersed in local communities, and that's how you learned, you know, your craft. And Karthik referenced earlier today that you could be a travel blogger in Brooklyn and never travel. How do you see the future of journalism, you know, that playing out, and do you fear losing that aspect of journalism will be detrimental, and how could you actually, you know, where does that fit in the future of journalism?
I was just talking to someone about this because I mean, when I started, I had an internship and I sent out 200 like resume tapes, VHS tapes, remember those? To like every small market in the country, and Topeka, Kansas called me. I'd never been there, but I was like, packed my car and went to Topeka, Kansas for $6 an hour. And then Richmond, Virginia, and then Baltimore. That I don't think is gonna happen anymore. I wish I learned so much, but what I'm seeing right now is that the younger journalists are skipping that step because they understand the new world better than we do. You know, if I were at, you know, in my old role at CNN, and, you know, or at NBC, I would hire, you know, the people who really understand what this new environment looks like. So weirdly, we're in this moment where young people are on a fast track, you know, in terms of what they can do, because you know, I know TV news obviously better than anything else, but, you know, at TV, the kids who are going to cover the campaign are kids, you know, because they understand how to do it. What I hope is, especially around local, and it's part of why I want to support these nonprofits like Report for America, is that they are taking, you know, grads, journalism school grads, young people who want to go start their careers in local because it's mission driven. You know, I was going to Topeka to just get my next job and try to be Andrea Mitchell. You know, it has to be mission driven in a way that they want to go and commit to being part of this community to help, you know, maintain community news. And we're also funding a project with Pulitzer. We did a $5 million gift to them for exactly this, to fund projects in these local communities. So I do think you'll also, like, I hope the next wave is going to be a lot of people who are willing to make, you know, that commitment to go like serve for a year or two in a local community before they move on, because it's so critical to our democracy that we not lose that.
I have an international question. So I want you to help me fact check something that I've read in a few places about how in places, I'd say like India, Burma, with the Rohingya massacre, Maduro, I've read that, for instance, in some of those countries, there is no sense of internet. The internet is Facebook in many of those countries. It's people with their phones on the street with not a lot of money, and internet is not really a thing. It's Facebook. That's their whole. So once you get in there and it becomes a closed loop, and it gets poisoned, like happens with Rohingya or Hindu and Muslim violence in India, or with Maduro, that's WhatsApp. And I know in WhatsApp you've restricted the number of reposts, I think. So, you know, is that all true? And that, to me, strikes fear in my heart, where people don't have access to a full range. They're being controlled by the people that they're following, and it almost becomes like a cancer. So that's
in some places it is true. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in those places where it just, you know, things haven't grown enough, it's even more important that the work we're doing, that we get it right. So I have just massively staffed up in that part of the world, in APAC and in India. In India, it's WhatsApp. Everything is WhatsApp. And because WhatsApp is encrypted, you can't do the kind of fact-checking and misinformation work we're doing on Facebook. They have made these product changes, and I do think they're critically important, because they're, you know, things spread so fast in groups on WhatsApp. And we saw this during the election in Brazil also. which is just really dangerous how it can potentially be manipulated. So we have made some product changes to WhatsApp. You used to could be able to forward to, I don't know, some 20 or endless numbers of groups. Now you can't forward to more than 5. And I think they've seen a significant difference since they made that product change. It's going to get hard. I mean, just by nature of it being encrypted, we don't know what's happening. So it's much harder. We are working with fact-checking organizations that can fact-check things that that are reported to us. But unless it's being reported to us, we can't do what we're doing with Facebook, where the fact checkers can actually identify things and then we can downrank them. It's just a lot harder, but I do think, I hope these product changes will help.
Myanmar, I've been to Burma probably about 8 times with the BBC, and when I first went in 2012, there wasn't an ATM, nobody had a phone. And on my last trip in 2014, everybody had a phone, and Facebook was the internet. So it must be a challenge. How do you even get that many Burmese speaking people to go through the content that they're creating? Because it is a language you won't get on most keyboards.
No, I mean, it's a real challenge. I just hired my first person in Myanmar, and I talked to her, and I'm worried about her safety. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just it's going to be a really challenging job. I mean, the job overall that Facebook has to do in this part of the world, because I feel like we have a real responsibility there. And, trying to figure out how we did a journalism training program for journalists in Myanmar. We're trying, without endangering anyone, because this is where it gets tricky, to support a free press, and that means teaching people in those parts of the world. I used to be on the board of the International Women's Media Foundation, and they do a lot of trainings for journalists all throughout Africa. We invested in these trainings, so we're trying to do that in these parts of the world, where I think over time it can make a difference, but it's a little bit scary. I wouldn't pretend. What?
Is it not happening in Africa?
Less so, but. With elections coming up, again, you think about 2020, I mean, we're just focused on every election, and it's this team, I think, just literally holds their breath, 24/7.
Campbell, thank you so much. We could have probably spent another half hour, and you got a big job, and we're so thankful for you to coming today and being so open and honest. Thank you so much. Everybody, join me in welcoming. Thank you.